All right, it is April 19th, 2021. You are watching the COVID Crash. I am your host, Rick Richards, and joining me today is very special guest, producer Dave.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I
Hey.
can't be great, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Great day.
Yeah, and Dave and I are reunited again in a broadcast as we were so many times last year, right, Dave?
Absolutely. I
Yes.
missed all those fun times. I was excited to do the show today.
Yeah, me too. Me too, old friend. And here we are again, right? I mean, it's been an entire year. And we're back in this predicament again. I am, of course, pumped on, oh man, this virtual background kills this. I am pumped on Havoc Neuro, and I'm going to be popping some Brainstorm. So that my mind is pretty sharp at the best of times, but this gets it like the edge of a razor. Gets me glowing like the metal on the edge of a knife.
Well, we picked a good day for this COVID crash because now we're dealing with a cellular crash. So
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, one thing the whole COVID situation has pushed everything into digital, right? Like everything is fucking digital now, man. And you just can't have these crashes. Rogers has been down since midnight of last night. And normally you get things like this and you think, okay, it's an hour, maybe two, right? And then it's repaired.
I think it's probably something to do with the 5G that snuck in during the COVID crash.
You think so?
I think so.
Well, I mean, it's
Rogers
pretty,
was the first to roll out the 5G.
yeah, that's true. I mean, and it is pretty, it's pretty alarming that they've had what, 14, 15 hours now and they still haven't fixed it.
Well, and you're also talking 10.9 million people that are Rogers customers. That's a lot of people without cell phone service today.
That's a lot of people. And didn't Ontario just start, they started their, they started online courses or something for school kids today, didn't they?
They did. But I don't know if you saw on the weekend, old Doug Ford decided to give in a little bit and allowed the parks to be open.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why were the parks closed? Like, I mean, it's amazing that we've been over a year, right? Like, I mean, it's been a year and a month. It's 13 months since this insanity all started, right? 13 months. And who's getting sick at parks? Like, is anybody identifying that as a hot spot?
Well, if I was pausing, I was doing it for a reason, Rick, because I'm trying to think about who would be getting sick at a park in the outdoors. And I'm sorry, but I couldn't come up with an answer.
I mean, we know that vitamin D and the sun make you healthier, right? I mean, that I think that's been pretty clearly established. We know that the survival rate is for anybody, for everybody in general, is about 98%. But if you take people that are under the age of 85 and people with no health preconditions, then the survival rate is something like 99.5%. So a healthier population is definitely better. I mean, but then it just doesn't make sense to close things like trails and parks. Like, what do you want people to do? Just lay down on the floor for what, 4 weeks until it passes?
Well, they close the marinas as well. You can't even go to your boat.
Yeah, like I mean, do you think of boats as another congested situation?
Absolutely not. What's the chance? What's the chance of catching COVID when you're doing 50 mile an hour across the water?
Yeah, and I guess see, I always try to jump into their thinking and think, okay, well, what's their rationale for doing this? Is it maybe they get people collecting in marinas, right? Or supply stores or you know taverns or bars, whatever, right? Maybe the whole activity has a lot of spin-off stuff that leads to congestion.
Well, honestly, I think that the areas of concern are the areas that have people working in close proximity. You know, when they talk about warehouses or assembly lines, typically are working shoulder to shoulder. So there's not room for self-isolation, but you take situations where self-isolation can be done, the chances of anybody getting, COVID are slim and none.
Yeah, well, I mentioned about a month ago I thought that I had COVID, and it turned out it was just a bad reaction from something the doctor had prescribed. But you, Dave, you got the jab yesterday, didn't you? Walk us through the experience, okay?
Actually, I will walk you through the experience of disappointment. So the government was kind enough to open it up to those who are considered caregivers for individuals that are in need. In my situation, I have two elderly folks, my father and my mother-in-law. They're both in due need of care. They got dementia, diabetes, and of course, if anybody knows those with severe case of dementia, they really don't know what they're doing day to day. So, I've been given the right of being the caregiver. I was given a letter from the doctor, proving that I was my father's caregiver, primary caregiver. My wife was also given a letter from the doctor as a primary caregiver. And so we went online and we decided to book a couple of vaccines up in Richmond Hill. Kind of excited, kind of scared, kind of nervous, didn't know what the heck to think. But hey, I decided that, if I got to do it for the old man, I'll do it for the old man. So we make our way up to Richmond Hill, and we're standing in line for about 45 minutes outside after they checked our paperwork. Of course, security comes, checks your paperwork, make sure you should be there. So we proceed to stand outside for 45 minutes, and we make our way inside, and we finally get up to the check-in, and the woman says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for the vaccine." I felt like the champ on Q107. I said, "Pardon?" Well, I snapped. I head faked her. Anyhow, because neither one of our parents are actually in an old age home, we don't qualify, both Kathleen and I, as primary caregivers. So they denied us.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
So out the door we went after about an hour.
Boy, you must have been pissed, eh?
I was a little more than pissed, Rick. I was frothing at the mask.
Well, and just so you know, Dave, I mean, I was looking at studies the other day on which comorbidities and all this stuff had the highest amounts of concern, and people with dementia, for whatever reason, they seem to suffer a lot, right? They seem to be more vulnerable to getting COVID. People with dementia and people with things like high blood pressure, especially.
Well, absolutely. Thankfully, both parents have got the vaccine, but as we know, that doesn't mean anything, because I have a situation where I have a friend of the family who they had all got their second vaccine shots because they're working the front line, and lo and behold, she still managed to come down with COVID. So just because you get the vaccine does not mean you can't get COVID. You may not get sick, but they say it's easier for you to transmit it to someone else because you're like a shield, so it just kind of hangs on you.
Well, I mean, that's the reason there that I really don't want the vaccine. I mean, I don't want anyone to put me in the anti-vaxxer camp, because I'm really not that. I don't give a shit, to be honest. But I mean, if I'm going to take a vaccine, I want to see that there's some real benefits. And if you ask somebody about the vaccine, they say, will that prevent me from getting it? No. Will it prevent me from getting one of the variants? No. Does it mean I can go without a mask? No. Does it mean I can travel freely now? No. So I mean, what's the point, man? What is the point of the vaccine?
Yeah, and you forgot one important thing. Can I come out of my house? No.
Yeah, exactly. Can I come out of my house? No. So, I mean, really, I guess the only upside to the vaccine is that people that would otherwise probably get seriously ill or die don't, right?
Potentially, you know, it was interesting because there was a woman yesterday in line. She was ahead of us, and she took an anxiety attack. She was like having trouble breathing, and she was very excited and stuff. And you know,
Before
so
or after?
sorry,
Before she got the vaccine or after?
this is before she went in. Like as we're standing in line, she started taking an anxiety attack, and I'm trying to talk to her, trying to get her mind off. And you know why she was so anxious and agitated was she said she works in manufacturing, and she had to get this vaccine to go to work. Her company told her she had to get this vaccine, and her biggest concern is she's, you know, there's something being stuck in her arm and she has no idea what it is.
Well, I guess that's partially true. I mean, she probably doesn't really have any idea what it is, and it is being stuck in her arm. Right? I mean, it's they do some weird stuff with vaccines that I didn't really know before. Like they use fetuses, like DNA from fetuses, don't they?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go too deep down to the vaccine rabbit hole because I'm clearly not an expert on them, and I don't know much about them, to be honest. I mean, my simple thought is this: if if something poses a real serious threat to me, I will get a vaccine. If I have a 99.5% chance of surviving something, I won't get the vaccine. That's really kind of where it ends and begins for me, right? I mean, probably the best course of action is for you to get the virus and then recover from it. And then it's basically the same as having the vaccine, right?
Well, again, like, I mean, if we look back to earlier days of our COVID crashes, you know, there's a very important sickness that disappeared this year, and that was the flu.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I heard someone even mention the word flu.
Yeah, there wasn't even really a flu season, was there?
And we wonder all that medication sitting in the drugstores is typically gobbled up from the cold and flu season. You wonder how that made out. Did it sell more? Did it sell less? Are they selling other products?
Yeah, what do they do with it? Do they dump it, right? How long does it last? Yeah, I mean, these are all things that nobody really, well, somebody obviously knows, but I mean, we don't, do we?
No, absolutely. So
And what, sorry?
I say it's an interesting time, Rick. You know, a very interesting time.
Yeah, well, my my old gray-haired daddy, you know, he's had a tough go of it through this whole fiasco the last year because he loves those casinos, right? He loves nothing better than getting himself into a casino, cozying up to one of the one-armed bandits, plugging in his quarters and his nickels and his dimes. You know, he's upset that they don't take pennies anymore. I'm like, man, what are you going to win when you put a penny in and the siren goes off and you hear the ding, 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 and all this stuff comes pouring out and you find, hey, I won $1.55, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all been closed on him, right? And that's been tough for him. So he went and got his vaccine yesterday. And yeah, sounds like a similar experience. He had to wait in line for about half an hour, 45 minutes. Got up there, got jabbed in the arm, got the Moderna, which I guess is one of the good ones, right? And he has to get another one in 4 months. So it was a pretty non-eventful thing for him. I said to him, I said, look, you're the guinea pig around here, okay? We're sending you out there to get the jab. And if you make it back and if you're still around in 6 months, then it looks like it's good.
Well, you know, what kills me about this vaccine and the whole process too is even the way they scan the process. Like, you know, you send in your documentation, you have verification online, you know, you take the time to fill out all this information only to be denied, you know, upon getting there.
Well, yeah, that was really I don't blame you for being livid about that, man. I mean, that's just ridiculous to be so inefficient. And then, I mean, once people, you know, it's not like you guys are teenagers either. Like you should be old enough, at least on that basis alone, to get one. And if you're in the lineup for 45 minutes and you've gotten a letter from your doctor and they still deny you, like, what the fuck? That Ontario government, they got some real issues out there, man.
Yes. Well, you know, like everybody qualifies for the AstraZeneca, but no one wants to take it.
Yeah, I mean, if I was getting a vaccine, I'd take that one. I mean, it sounds like you got a small chance of a blood clot, but I mean, if you're concerned enough that, the virus has got you that worried, then just take that, right?
Yeah, but like, I mean, anybody that I've known that's taken the AstraZeneca, like, I mean, their symptoms, they're sick as a dog the next day. They're, they got chills and aches and pains and,
Yeah.
it's days of uncomfortableness, right?
They'll probably send that one out to BC.
Whereas the one, the Moderna and Pfizer, all I've ever heard is people complaining of a sore shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. My old gray haired daddy didn't even have a sore shoulder. Just
No.
went in, barely wakes him up. He's got very poor nerve endings. So it may cause infertility though.
Yeah, that's a concern at 75 years old.
Yeah. He's not the ladies' man he used to be. So it may take a while before we find out whether he's infertile.
He may need some MRT, get that test level back up.
Yeah. Well, we'll give it to him, won't we?
Exactly.
So now, Dave, when this whole thing started a year ago, right? It was kind of crazy, wasn't it?
It was extremely crazy.
Now, did you, in any circumstance, did you envision that you would still be in this situation in a year?
I thought that it would be 2 weeks, maybe a month. And, once the nice weather gets here, I thought it'd be gone. I honestly did. In the summertime, obviously we didn't think about it as much because we were, certainly able to maneuver around. We're able to get around. The restrictions weren't as bad. But, come August, I said to myself, come October, November, I won't be surprised if we're locked down again. And sure enough, here we are.
You were expecting it again in the fall?
Well, when I went through the summer and it was still around, I knew that the cold season, it would show it reared its ugly head.
Yeah, I mean, last year when they shut everything down last year, I thought to myself, this is insanity. I thought, okay, they're going to do this for 2 weeks. I guess it's just a complete wild overreaction. They're going to do this for 2 weeks and then things will be back to normal. And then when it went on for 3 weeks and then 4 weeks, and they said, this is going to be with us for a while. And then Trudeau comes out and says, things are not going to go back to normal until we have a vaccine. I thought, holy shit, man. And then the vaccine, they're still not back to normal. So, I mean, I'm through trying to predict on when anything will get back to normal because I don't know, man.
Well, and they're going by science, right? They're going by science. They're making all these decisions based on science. Well, how do you make a decision based on science when you've never had a situation like this before to base your science on?
Well, exactly. And I mean, they're being overly cautious. I mean, we can look back in hindsight now, and we both talked about this last year in the early days, clearly this is something that affects the oldest and the sickest people of the population, right? So it would have been way, way more cost effective and way less disruptive to society in general if we just took extreme care and extreme measures in protecting those most vulnerable people and then let everybody else go about their business, right?
Well, the part that slays me is, you look at the rest of the world, just on the weekend, the UFC announced May 26th, I think it is. It's their first time that they're going to have a sold out facility in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not going to be social distancing in a UFC fight. So why are they able to do it? And why is Texas wide open? And why is Israel now going to be wide open? And why is, these other countries are wide open, but yet Canada's locked up tighter than a drum?
Yeah, tighter than a drum. That's what you were going to say, right? Well, you know what, Dave? It's funny you say that because I'm going to share some stats here. Share some stats. Let me share the screen first. Okay, so Texas. We were just talking about the great state of Texas. These are all the counties in Texas. Now, Texas at the beginning of March, so probably about at least 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks from ago, they dropped their mask mandates. They dropped their mask mandates I don't know if they're still pushing any kind of social distancing, but things have definitely loosened up a lot there. And if we look, daily cases, peaked back in January, and they have been falling ever since. And the mask mandate came off back in March, and cases have fallen from them still, right? Now to the point where they're in the entire state of Texas, which is about 20 million people, there's maybe 1,300 cases a day, which is pretty close to what we have in BC with a population of about 4 million people. So they got 5 times as many people, but the same amount of cases, and very few, if any, restrictions are left, right?
Yeah, but can you can you attribute that, because Texas, the weather in Texas right now would be hot.
Well, I don't really attribute it to anything. I don't necessarily attribute it to dropping the mask, if that's what you're asking. But it's something, it it's something to think about, though, right?
Yep.
Florida is another one. I mean, Florida, their cases peaked also back in January, and they've come way down. And again, this may be, like you say, something that's cyclical with the weather, right? Either way, it doesn't seem like the masks do a whole lot of good.
No.
Because I mean, the weather's getting warmer in BC and Ontario, and our cases are still going up. And everybody, like, I don't go anywhere now where people are not wearing a mask. I see people walking down the road by themselves with not another person in sight, and they're wearing masks, right?
Well, and in the heat, like, I mean, you wear those masks in the heat, and they're so uncomfortable too, right?
Yeah, well, they got kids wearing them when they're running track and field and stuff like that. So let's look at a place that would be the complete opposite. Let's see, Australia or New Zealand. Austria. Because their summer is our winter and our winter is their summer, right? Hmm. Australia, here we go. So now we should expect that their cases were very low and are climbing up. That's not even the case. Their cases peaked last summer, and they've just completely fallen off to almost nothing, right?
Well,
They had a little bit of a bump, it looks like, back in December, which is their summer. So I mean, I don't know. They had an early bump last year, right at the beginning of all this. They had another bump, a second wave, I guess you would call it, in the middle of our summer or their winter, right? And since then, nothing. How about the UK? The United Kingdom. The United Kingdom had a lot. They had a really chaotic experience with all of this. Daily new cases, look at them. They've completely fallen off too. From January, 67,000 in January on one day, on January 8th, to now down to 1,800. Again, this is a country with 60 million people, and they have less daily cases than Ontario, and not many more than BC. So, I mean, Canada has really done something wrong, right?
well, I don't think like, I mean, the restrictions, they didn't take the border restrictions as serious as everybody else did.
I don't think England did either. I don't think Texas did.
Plus, what's the vaccine ratio for those countries versus Canada? Like, I mean, good old Trudeau seemed to mess up on his vaccine count, and everybody's complaining about it, right?
Yeah, I wonder if that's a stat that they track. Closed cases, vaccinated.
What's the percentage of vaccinated versus population?
Let's find out. These things, it's hard to see how often they update it, but let's share the screen so everyone can have a look. Okay, so Israel has vaccinated 60% of their population. They are the highest. The United Kingdom has vaccinated almost half their population. Let's clear this. So let's look at Canada. So far, we've vaccinated 24% of our population. Well, that's pretty low, eh, Dave?
That's very low.
They only go by country here. Let's see Australia. Australia has pretty much eliminated this. Oh, Australia is not even using the vaccine, it looks like. Wow, that's crazy, eh?
They're not even using the vaccine.
It doesn't look like it, no. Like, I mean, there's no meaningful statistics on it, that's for sure. Maybe it's just not tracked in this. Well, there you go. I mean, Europe in general looks pretty low, but I'm guessing there's just a bunch of places that haven't done a lot with it. Spain, 20%. So Canada's kind of like with these bottom feeder type countries, it looks like. 24%, that seems pretty low when you compare it to places like the UK and Israel, right?
Yeah.
The United States. So I guess that's why maybe once we get up to 40%, then we're going to see our cases drop off dramatically.
What was the US? Did we look at the US number? What the percentage was?
Let's find out. United States, here we go. 35%, almost 40%. Yeah, the US is 40%. And that's with 330 million people. So I don't know. It shows you got a bit of a problem when you rely so heavily on other countries to produce your vaccines and stuff like that. That's another issue, right?
Yeah.
So Dave, before we go, I want to hear your predictions for how things are going to unfold in the next 3-4 months.
Well, my predictions for the next, what are we in now? April, May, June, July, August. So I see the case count come May. Let's call it May 15th. We'll start to see the case counts dissipating, and as the vaccines increase, and I think by August we'll still have the COVID. We'll still be hovering around probably the 800 to 1,000 people a day mark, and then if the vaccines aren't in people's arms by September, I would say come October, November, when it starts to get colder again, we'll see the fourth wave.
Okay, so you're predicting probably a fourth wave then.
Potentially, yep.
And then what measures will go along with the fourth wave?
What measures? In my mind, the measurements that go along with the fourth wave are not having enough vaccines in people's arms.
Well, I mean, what restrictions do you think are going to follow this fourth wave? Is it going to be the same as you're dealing with now?
I think it'd be less. I think as the strains continue on, they just continue to get weaker. Like if you look at the first strain that we had, it was pretty deadly. The second strain wasn't as deadly. This third strain that we're currently dealing with now, it's more contagious, but it's less harmful. And I think that the fourth, if there is a fourth, it'll be that much more less harmful.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So in short, you think we got another year of shit ahead of us, right?
I would say another good 6 months.
Now, do you think travel restrictions are going to lift at all?
Well, I think the travel restrictions are going to ease up a bit because as we see these other countries like the US and that, like, I mean, where the case counts are minimalizing, as things warm up here in Canada, we get into our summertime, I think we'll start to see a lot of easement and restrictions. I would say by July we should be driving across the border.
By July?
Yeah.
Wow, Dave's gone out on a limb. He's calling July open borders in North America. All right, I'm going to give my prediction now. Well, as you know, Dave, I mean, we've done a good job as a business of navigating these turbulent times, right? In a very short time. But I think a lot of companies are being propped up right now with government benefits and loans and stuff like that. The government can't do that forever, so some of them are going to start to collapse. I think we're going to be dealing with a lot of supply issues over the next, probably for the next year. I think we're going to be dealing with supply issues.
I think what's going to cause supply issues, Rick, is that people are going to take advantage of that. They're going to drive the prices through the roof, or people can't afford to get the stuff.
Yeah, and hoarding, and see, I mean, that's the thing, right? Once you start dealing with shortages, inventory becomes an asset, right? It becomes a valuable asset. Whereas, if the economy starts tanking, you don't want to be stuck on inventory. It becomes a bit of a liability, right? But once you see that hoarding, yeah, prices. I mean, we're already seeing prices go up. What's the price of gas in Ontario now?
Dollar for regular, it's $1.29.9.
Yeah, well, out here it's $1.55. And last year it was 79 cents at the lowest. The lowest point during the whole pandemic reaction, it was 79 cents. So it's pretty well doubled in a year. That's a lot, right?
Well, but the amount of hybrid vehicles in Vancouver is very high. So the demand for gas, the demand for gas, the consumption, is probably fairly low, driving the cost up.
Well, I don't know if that would drive the cost up. I think that would drive the cost down, right?
No, it would drive the cost up because, like, I mean, you're transporting in, you're not selling liters, right? I'd be curious to see, when you look at the gas numbers, Rick, what the volume difference is between, Ontario and BC per capita. It'd be interesting to look at.
Yeah, I mean, there's bottleneck issues too with refineries and stuff like that. And I mean, most of these prices are driven by world events as much as anything. I mean, wood prices are going through the roof right now, building supplies. That's going to have an effect. Well, we're already seeing that effect on homes, right? The real estate market. So yeah, I mean, really, I think there's a lot of turbulence and who knows if it's going to settle down, right? You need a sense of stability for things to kind of settle down into a rhythm, right? There's a lot of talk that the stock market is due for a big correction in May or June. I don't know, man. They've been saying that for 5-10 years almost now, probably close to it, right? Like there's always a correction coming, but you never really get specific dates on that.
Well, there's chatter of Bitcoin correcting itself.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's very possible too. I think Bitcoin's at a stage now where every time there's a bit of a correction, people just jump on it and start buying it. Yeah. And it goes back up again, right? Or it stabilizes. Like it doesn't seem to, the fluctuations aren't as volatile as they have been. And maybe that's just because there's so much institutional investment in it now, right?
Perhaps, yeah.
So yeah, I predict a lot of instability. I hate to say this, but I think this time next year, I think when 2022 rolls around, I think we're still going to be wearing masks. I think this is becoming a permanent feature of life in and around the world because people have just been now, I think the conditioning for the last year has been so great that people are just now paranoid. And whether it's whether it's COVID or something else or a flu, then it's just going to be an easy adjustment to make to just put on a mask, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's safe to say, Rick, you would agree then, come summertime, we'll see some relaxation, then come October, November, we'll start to see the ramp up again? Is that what you're predicting?
Yeah, I mean, there's for Ontario, absolutely. There has to be some relaxation. Like they can't keep you guys locked down the way they have you now, right? I mean, that's just, people will just stop listening to it at some point. And I think they're getting close to that point now. So
Well, I heard they're doing the border. Like, I mean, you can't go from Ontario to Quebec without being stopped now. You can't go from Ontario to Manitoba without being stopped now.
yeah, exactly. Like you guys are essentially prisoners in your province, and they're probably going to be doing that everywhere now as well, right? Yeah, I think things will loosen up. Things have to loosen up, otherwise people will just completely check out. But I mean, the thing is, how much do they loosen up? Like, it's getting hard to tell what's unrestricted and what's restricted now, right? Like, I mean, you can still go to a restaurant. Now you can't sit in the regular section. You have to sit in the dining room or the patio, at least here in BC, right? You have to wear a mask when you walk through the door, and you can take it off when you have your food, right? So, I mean, we're into the situation. Like last year at this time, things were very clear, right? Everything was closed essentially, except takeout, gas stations, and grocery stores. That was about it. Everything else was pretty much closed. But now we're in these kind of weird situations where, like, yeah, you can go to a restaurant just like you always did, but now you sit on a patio and you have to go in with a mask and out with a mask, right? You can still go to Walmart. You can still go to the superstore. I don't know. It's just a weird kind of, I think a lot of this stuff is just never going to go away, unfortunately, right?
Well, it's interesting because whenever I go out, whether it's to Shoppers Drug Mart, whatever store it is, I always get to the door and realize, shit, I gotta go get my mask. Like, it's not, for me, it's not a habit to get out of my car, put my mask on, walk to the door. I get out of my car, I walk to the door, then realize, oh my God, forgot my mask. Back to the car, grab my mask, and then walk to the door, and I still won't put it on until I get to the door.
It's funny, that happened to me yesterday. I walked up to McDonald's. It's about a 15-minute walk. And when I got there, I realized I had left my mask behind. I'm like, oh, fuck. But I mean, the thing with travel, like, yeah, they might open the borders in July, but I don't think we're going to see 2019 travel. I think the lineups are going to be incredibly long, and you're going to have some kind of vaccine passport to go along with your regular passport, or some kind of COVID pass. Like, I think everything we think is being reopened and stuff like that is all going to have a catch behind it.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine on the weekend, and he travels a lot with his job, and one of his fears, funny enough, is not so much getting COVID, but one of his fears is getting COVID and being in another country and getting sick.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because the hospitalization, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can mitigate that with insurance, right? Like, getting sick in a foreign country is always, that's always a concern of some degree, right? I've actually had that happen to me. The one time I actually got a flu, I was in Spain, because a lot of times traveling really breaks down your immune system.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Travel insurance is an easy enough way to deal with that, right? I think my big concern would be trying to get testing and stuff like that, without getting ripped off or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll find out, won't we?
Absolutely.
One thing about the future, it always comes. All right. So, shall we draw a line under it for there, Dave?
Till we meet again, Mr. DeBanks.
Yes.
Over and out.
Fairly soon, right?
Sounds like a plan. I'll call you when I get my cell phone back going.
Yeah. Hopefully. 2 weeks for the cell phone service, maybe, right?
But you know what? It's good for Bell though. There's gonna be a lot of new business for Bell.
You know what? I saw Bell advertising. They're advertising in my Twitter feed. I noticed.
I'm sure they would be.
Yeah, they're jumping all over this, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next time.
Over and out.
Adios.